Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ave Maria Press Professional Development webinar series. In this webinar, Monica Ortega, co-author of Lovemaking, How to Talk About Sex with Your Spouse, will explore how ministry leaders can integrate spiritual and human formation when addressing the topic of lovemaking. My name is Erin Pierce. I'm the publicist at Ave Maria Press. Everyone in the audience is muted today, but you are able to ask questions. Questions can be sent to our presenter using the questions box here on the GoToWebinar panel, and I'll read as many of those as possible at the end of the presentation today. This webinar is being recorded. I will send you a link to the recording via email tomorrow, and you are free to share this with friends, colleagues, family, etc. With that, I would like to welcome and introduce our presenter today. Monica Ortega is a math teacher for the Imago Dei Classical Academy, a middle school youth minister, a co-host of the To Become Family podcast, and an author. Ortega earned a bachelor's degree in math and education from Western Connecticut State University and a Master of Education degree in educational leadership from the American College of Education. Together with her husband, Renzo, their testimonies of faith, marriage, and parenting have been featured by the National Catholic Register, the Knights of Columbus, and Augustine Institute. She is the author of the children's devotional, co-author of the children's devotional, Go to Joseph for Children. Ortega lives in Connecticut with her husband and their 5 children. Monica, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, Erin, thank you so much for having me. It's really such a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to it. I'm going to go ahead and make you presenter.
Sure. Okay. So as this kind of loads and gets ready, I just wanted to say hello. Thank you all for being here and tuning in or tuning in later on. I have a very, very big love for ministry leaders in the church. I was fostered and formed by many, many great people. And so I know that what you're doing is not easy. I know that it keeps you up late at night. I know that it stretches you in good ways, but it stretches you. So I thank you for being here. I also did just,
I'm gonna let you take it from here.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And I also just wanted to preface too, apologies ahead of time. My 5 kids are watching a movie, so we should be good to go, but just in case they might come in and interrupt, and I want to apologize. And also my power cord just fell out of my laptop, so 1 second. Okay, so I'd like to welcome you to this particular topic of lovemaking and intimacy, especially obviously for married couples, and introduce myself a little bit. So, so ministering to married couples, guiding couples in love and intimacy. This can often be it's obviously a sensitive topic, so it's very, very tricky to broach this topic with other people, especially in your parishes. You know them, it's even harder, all that stuff. So our hope, my husband and I's hope in writing the book and hosting our podcast is to help inspire these conversations to get started in sometimes an awkward but authentic way. And so here's a little bit about what we'll be covering today. So I'll introduce myself a little bit better. But I want to talk about the importance of marriage ministry, the process of evangelization, how to reach the people that you are entrusted with. In particular, we're going to focus on human formation needs, and then how can you start marriage ministry? How can you bolster a marriage ministry that already exists? What are some key pieces that we think are effective for that? So a little bit more about me. This is a photo of my husband, Lorenzo, and I. We've been married for 12 years. Like Erin said, we have 5 kids. We co-host a podcast called To Become Family, which started truthfully as youth ministers. We now have lots of former teens who are newlyweds, young parents, getting started in their real adult life, and we are having a lot of intimate and personal conversations with them. However, because they live all over the country and because time is limited and all these different things, we just weren't able to really get into as much as we wish that we could. And the same was felt for these young adults. So we truthfully started recording our podcast mostly for them, just to give them more of what they were asking for about, okay, I get the theology, but what about this daily life interruption or this daily life experience? I get that, but what about mental health? I get that, but what about in-laws? I get that, but what if my parents are the in-laws? All those things. So we started that way, and some other people found the podcast, and it's kind of taken on a life of its own. We do love to come out and visit and speak, and currently the main reason why Ave has graciously invited me here is we co-authored the book Lovemaking, How to Talk About Sex with Your Spouse. I am continually humbled and honored that Ave trusted us to speak on such a topic, and we do speak on it together. So Renzo and I wrote this book together. You will hear both of our voices in the text. The masculine complements the feminine. We both speak differently. We are different people, so hopefully that back and forth of the two voices helps to also inspire couples to have good quality conversations about the topic of lovemaking. Okay, so I know that there's going to be such a variety of backgrounds for all of you. Some of you may have a dedicated marriage enrichment ministry. If that's the case, hopefully this inspires you to keep focusing on that, keep encouraging that. And if your parish maybe doesn't have a specifically dedicated marriage enrichment ministry, hopefully this can inspire you to maybe start one. Couples, sorry, the piece is covering. Couples need a place to strengthen their relationship through enrichment. And sorry, apologize. Piece covering my text on my end. So I think one thing that we see, and I think that many of you will probably see this as well in your own lives, in your own parishes, in your own communities. Sometimes marriage is seen as the default vocation. So when we talk about praying for vocations, we're often referencing praying for men to accept the call to priesthood, for women to accept their call to religious life. And then if you've been praying about that and you don't hear that call from the Lord, then that must mean that I'm going to get married. And as we can see through, many of you know, especially sacrament preparation, in particular communion and first confession, as well as confirmation, those are robust catechesis programs. You spend a lot of time with the children in particular, but if we're talking about RCIA or OCIA, we spend a lot of time, quality time, with our people. Some of you may even, and I hope this is the case, but for children preparing for sacraments, that their parents are included in this. So extended family is included. But typically with marriage prep might be one day. It might be a weekend retreat. Some parishes and dioceses do have wonderful mentorship programs and things like that. But I think that we can all agree that the sacrament of marriage, the preparation for that is not as robust as some of the other sacraments. And part of that might be good, or it comes from, you know, a good place. In Familias Consortio, John Paul II said that marriage preparation should begin within the family. That is where we're supposed to learn what married life is supposed to look like, what family life is supposed to look like. We're supposed to learn that because we live it, and then we just continue to live it in different mature fashions. So then as we, you know, through childhood, we learn what the love of a mother and a father is. We learn how to receive love. As we get older and have more responsibilities, we learn how to love others through service, right? And And so we're supposed to learn that. We're supposed to learn good communication. We're supposed to learn sacrificial love. We're supposed to learn all these things in our family life. And that might not be, or probably isn't the case for most people. Even if you come from a really, really wonderful family, there we are all fallen humans, and so there is something lacking, and our church is supposed to be the answer for anywhere that we are lacking. Grace and the church are supposed to be there to help fill that gap. And so there's a big burden for us working in ministry, but hopefully it's something that you're like, oh shoot, you're right. This is something that is so in us to want to love well. So hopefully that inspires you to want to do this. Couples in particular, now that they've created something new, they were two individuals, now they've created a new family, two have become one flesh. They desire as a new unit to be seen, known, and loved. So obviously every individual person wants that as well, but I think that looks a little bit different for couples. Married life is surprisingly challenging. I think a lot of us, through dating somebody for a long time, engagement, you ask so many hard questions. You're making so many plans for the future, and you're like, oh, we know each other well, we like each other, we love each other, and then married life still is challenging. So that's important to acknowledge and to be real about. And then marriage also has the potential to heal individuals and families with the cooperation of grace. Where we are lacking, where we are insufficient, God is enough. God is more than enough. So we obviously have to always point them back to Christ. So there's this human formation and the spiritual formation element to just life in general, but to marriage and family life in particular for today. So couples also need a place to seek help for common problems, which we're going to call accompaniment. Couples need to know that they are not alone. A lot of people assume because marriage is the common vocation, because marriage is the common sacrament, right? It's more common than priesthood. It's more common than religious life. The assumption is that it's natural. Like there has been marriage since the beginning of time. Adam and Eve were married. Like it should just be easy and normal. So we feel sometimes when we're met with struggle and conflict that there's some sort of failure, there's some sort of inadequacy in us or in our marriage. And sometimes that can be very scary. It can be very scary to feel like because this is hard, it must be wrong. And one thing that is important for us as a church community is to allow couples to know that they are not alone in this, that they are not alone in the fact that marriage is not as easy as you may have thought. Marriage is not like the next phase of dating, the next phase of engagement. It's not a different level or a different tier of the same thing. We also have to remind couples that marriage is a brand new thing. What did not exist the day before your marriage exists now. So while your relationship, your couplehood existed prior to marriage, your family did not. You now created something brand new. And so that new thing, however, is still influenced by a lot of the old things, a lot of the things that we were encountering or experiencing before marriage, our families of origin, habits and addictions and behaviors that we have, our careers, our schedules, all of those things, they existed before. And marriage doesn't just poof, make them disappear. So while something new has been created, it is not immune to all of the old things. And then we can also add children to the mix. So couples need to know that they are not alone, that this is complex, this is complicated. And just in knowing that, intimacy can grow, and the ability to open up and be authentic, and the opportunity to ask questions can happen. So couples need to not know they're not alone, and we need to accompany them. Couples also need a place that can help build community. So they're not alone, and they can be surrounded by people, and not just people, right? There's a quote by Mother Teresa: "The most terrible poverty is loneliness and feeling unlovable." And she was actually referencing the like Western culture of how we are often so surrounded. We're surrounded by people. We are not alone, but we feel so lonely. And so it's important for our churches to be the models of authentic and real community. I know that we've all, at least maybe it's not our own parish, but we've all attended a mass somewhere where a mass begins, everyone walks in, a mass ends, and everyone walks out. And there's very little interaction, there's very little communication. And for somebody that's new to a place such as that, that can feel disappointing, right? And so it's important for our churches to model good, authentic community. It's really important for our parishes to be the place where couples can go and feel like they belong. So some things that lack of community can exacerbate is fear of exposure. So if somebody knows the real me, if somebody knows what's really happening in our home, if the people around me were to really see or hear or understand what my life is like, it would be all over. And so there's a lot of isolation, there's a lot of self-isolation, there's a lot of withdrawal that comes from that because we don't feel like we belong. But there's something on the flip side that is so safe about solidarity, being in a place where other people have seen, heard, know what we've done, and not only that, but they have maybe some level of experience with that, somebody they love, maybe themselves, and there's safety in feeling seen. And then beyond that, being safe to be here, we can then take that to the next level and offer accountability for things that, you know what, lack of virtue does need to be worked on, right? And one of my favorite phrases is to be called up instead of called out. So this idea of accountability and building community, once this is a safe place for me to belong, I'm open to being called up, because being called up is being encouraged to live my full potential versus being called out, where the point of being called out is to point a finger and to shame someone. So a lot of people have this perception that the church is calling us out in our sin, whereas authentic church community can call us up, can acknowledge the failures, can acknowledge sin, but to call us up to our full potential. That can only happen if we are seen, if we feel safe, because we know that we belong here. So in order to call up, that basic need of community has to be in place first, before the correction, before the accountability. But knowing that you are not alone is crucial. In a safe place, in a place where I can bring my real self, my authentic self, I don't have to hide, I don't have to isolate. Couples then need an opportunity to encounter Jesus. And they first encounter that through us as their ministers, as the laity, as the priests, as the religious who are around and available, who see them, who say hello to them, who ask how they're doing and really care about their answer, who follow up with that answer the next time they see that, hey, I heard you had a big interview. How did it go? I heard that your mom had surgery. How is she doing? You know what? You look so lovely in that new dress, whatever it might be, like just noticing That's a first encounter of Jesus, being available, meeting them where they are, and then being available. Again, the next phase after they feel safe is to offer compassion, to suffer with. This is one of Jesus's great attributes, is that he was able to suffer with the people that he loved. He wept, he rejoiced, he feasted, and he suffered with his people. So to be available, to acknowledge, to see that, and to be in there, that's an encounter of Jesus. And through that encounter, people are going to be more open to real Jesus in the flesh, and encountering Jesus through the Mass, through adoration. It's very, very intimate and vulnerable to pray. So shared prayer time comes after feeling safe and willing. And the sacrament of confession and meeting Jesus in his mercy, with the priest in persona Christi. So a lot of this background work that I know that you all are so passionate about and enthusiastic for, just know that that is effective in helping your community encounter Jesus. And this is really important, especially in the topic of talking about and discussing and bringing up lovemaking and intimacy. People aren't going to be willing to talk about that if they don't first feel safe, right? So I feel like this age is really important. Okay, so we're going to talk just a little bit about marriage enrichment and tying it into the process of evangelization and discipleship. Some of you may have seen this before. So I won't take too long, but this has been well studied, so it is important. And I'm sorry, I'm going to move this little box because it's in my it's in my way again. 1 second. Okay, so these tiers, these levels, these ways of going through the process of evangelization, thrown in there is accompaniment and community building. It's important for us to know this. So this is just a diagram. This is like a visual aid for knowing the places where our people might be. And that's the tricky part of our job, right? In ministry is we are going to have a lot of people in a lot of different areas of their walk with Jesus, of their space in faith. Sherry Waddell has a great line: never accept a label in place of a story. So all of the people that we love and care for and are entrusted to be there for are going to be in different places for so many different things, whether it's lack of exposure, overexposure, family life, trauma, whatever it may be, culture, social experiences, all the things. Anyway, so here's a little visual of where your people are coming from and where you're hoping to bring them. Okay, so the first few stages are pre-trust, trust, and curiosity. And this is why I spent a lot of time, and I apologize if it felt a little bit belabored, but what's really important for people to stay in the church, for people to keep coming back, for people to feel like they belong anywhere, but particularly in the Catholic Church, is they first need to go through the steps of pre-trust, trust, and curiosity. Before they're ready to be catechized, they need to feel like they can be here in the first place. Is it okay for me where I'm at to belong here? What if I'm not, what if I don't know enough? What if I don't believe all the things? What if I have doubt? That is okay, right? And we welcome that. We encourage that, because you need to work through that to get to the next spot. So before we even try to convince them of anything, we need to first let them know that they belong, and allow for their trust and their curiosity to be tested and to be welcomed and to be encouraged. So then a lot of our parishioners will be also at the stage of openness. All right, I'm willing to hear what you have to say. I heard the church teaches a lot of things about sexual immorality. Now that I trust you, and now that I've been curious, like this place seems okay, I'm open to now hearing why. What about it? Explain this a little bit more. Openness. I'm open, I'm willing to receive. Gosh, how analogous is that to lovemaking, right? I am open and I'm ready to receive. Huge, right? So there's all these connections that God has made to loving his people, right? And all of the marriage analogies that we see in scripture. Here we have it in evangelization on the topic of lovemaking, right? Is being open and willing to receive Christ and his church. Active seeking is not only like, oh, openness is still a little bit passive, like, all right, I'm here, I'm willing to take what you got. Whereas active seeking is now I'm going to participate and now I'm going to engage. I'm going to go there. And first conversion is where all of that collides with with Jesus Christ as the answer. So that's like, oh, okay, some of this stuff makes reasonable sense. Some of this stuff makes social sense. First conversion is like, aha, the person Jesus. Aha, the church that he formed. And not everyone in your pews is there yet. So we just need to really acknowledge that. We really need to know that and be ready for it. Okay, so here are the rest of the stages. Later on, there is co-missioning, a missionary disciple, those people who are then willing to be ministers with you, to be your right-hand man, to be the people inviting and going out, right? So that's going to take a while. But man, you wanna hold on to those people tight because they're your good buddies. But a few things that you need to ask yourself, and then you need to ask about your parish. Excuse me. And this requires you to be super honest. And this is why it's important, and this was why it has to be discussed before we even talk about how you're going to talk about sex and lovemaking with your people, is you need to be honest about yourself, and you need to be honest about where you're at and what are you ready for and what are you not ready for, and to just be okay with that. And that, like, truly, that's okay. So to acknowledge, what stage of discipleship are you in your journey? How can you gauge your parishioners? How does your marriage enrichment program, if it's already established or if you're going to create one, how does it reach the different stages of discipleship? Do you separate it into groups who are in the pre-trust curiosity stage, and then have a separate group that meets that's more discipleship and missionary focused? Or do you put them together? I don't know the answer to that, but that you have to be real about that. And big, how can you accompany couples after a program or event? A lot of times we are really good about putting on a thing, our Friday night, our Saturday retreat, or things like that. What are you going to do? What plan do you have in place to accompany the couples afterwards? Not every couple is going to want to be accompanied. They're not going to want that all the time. They're not going to want all the attention. They might not have the time. But how are you going to be available for that if there is someone that does, or if there is a couple or a few that do? All right, I'm going to keep going. Human formation needs for married couples. So this is one of the big things that Renzo and I really love talking about, and this is a primary focus of our podcast and our book. And it's the avoidance of spiritual bypassing and real integration. So while we have talked a lot, and you know so well, you know your catechism, you know your catechesis, you know and love Jesus. I really believe that, I really do. But we are also ministering to human people. And so while God can do anything, he chose to make us humans. He chose to make us mind and body and spirit and psychology. He chose to make us all of those things, and we cannot, if we're going to really love and meet our people where they are, we cannot just focus on the spiritual. So what is human formation? John Paul II speaks a lot about human formation. He may not have ever really used the term, but he did speak about it. Human maturity, and in particular, effective maturity, requires a clear and strong training in freedom. That freedom requires the person to be truly master of oneself. He needs to acknowledge his selfishness and individualism and transform that into a generous dedication of service to one's neighbor. So again, this real acknowledgement about who we are, where we are today, and what areas of our life can stand for some improvement. And again, like we said before, that could be our prayer life, that could be our virtue, that could be a lot of spiritual things, absolutely. But if we only focus on those and we do not ever address our communication skills, our emotional intelligence, our discipline, our time management skills, our financial literacy, like there are so many other parts that affect who we are and then therefore affect our marriage. And if we're going to have a truly quality marriage enrichment program at our parish, we need to include those things because they culminate then therefore into lovemaking. So what about spiritual formation? We're not going to forget about that. That's absolutely not what we're saying. We're not bypassing spiritual formation, but there are times where we spiritually bypass and just make everything spiritual and forget the human parts. So loosely quoted, grace perfects nature from St. Thomas Aquinas. We have to have this foundation of our nature, of how things just are for the human experience. And then grace can be allowed to perfect that. Grace can be allowed grace can be then what allows us to be great. It helps us to better understand the why of the gospel, better understand church teaching, and by having spiritual formation and human formation, we can really start to see that Catholicism, our faith, our religion, is a relationship. It's not a set of rules. It's not a how to be a good person manual. It's absolutely an integrated relationship with the God of the universe and the person Jesus. And so we need both. So if you're working on a marriage ministry, if you have one, you're creating one. What are some things that couples need practically? And these are where the human formation is happening. And this isn't like checking the boxes. This is like a human formation within yourself that you can then share with your couple. So what do they need from you from a human formation perspective? What do you need to work on to then be able to transform the couples? So authentic enthusiasm. If you want an effective marriage ministry, whomever is leading that needs to have authentic enthusiasm for marriage and the couples that they are encountering. They have to authentically be happy to invite them in, to encourage them, to be excited with them, to celebrate milestones, a new job, a new house, a new baby, like that transition from engagement, like celebrate their engagement, celebrate their first wedding anniversary, things like that. To have a really good program, you need people who are authentically enthusiastic for the audience. They need honesty, so you need people who are ready and willing to be honest, obviously in a charitable and kind way, but we are growing, the generations, millennials, Gen Z, they're, I wrote this nicer on the screen because it's going to be documented, but they have strong BS meters. They can tell when you're faking it. They can tell when you're faking enthusiasm. They can tell when you're just giving them the answer that you think they want to hear. You can tell, they can tell, excuse me, if you're giving an answer that is kind of scripted, like, oh, whenever somebody asks this question, just make sure the church answers this way, and they can tell. So, in addition to enthusiasm, you need authenticity, mentorship. Another thing that young couples need, married couples need, is mentorship. Couples who are a few stages ahead of them. It's interesting now we've gotten to enter a little bit into a mentorship. We haven't been married too long. We've been married 12 years. We have some kids. Our kids are now, I don't have any more babies. I have 11, he's turning 11 on Monday, and my youngest just turned 4. And so all of my kids now are out of the baby stage. And so while I'm not an expert, I do get to invite couples, younger couples who are in the toddler and baby season. And I'm not going to try to pretend like I know how to help a parent who has, well, I guess in youth ministry, I do offer a little bit of advice for teens, but I'm not going to talk about how to parent a teenager. I haven't ever been there. I haven't done that. But there are different seasons of couples in your parish, and you can definitely pair them up with other couples a few seasons ahead of them, for mentorship. Couples who are willing to invite them in and just be real, just be honest. I appreciated so much one young woman. I didn't clean up before she came, and she's like, I'm so glad you didn't, because then I could see that this is what a house normally looks like. It's not just my house. I'm not a failure because there's oatmeal on the floor and the toys aren't put away. So couples who are willing to be honest and enthusiastic. And then being very, very careful with your communication to avoid spiritual bypassing. Like, absolutely redemptive suffering. This is an example. Absolutely redemptive suffering is a thing. You can offer up all of your suffering. But if you encounter a married couple that is struggling in their marriage for whatever reason, the only thing that you say should not be, oh, offer it up and put it with Jesus on the cross. Like, thank you, absolutely not wrong, but you have not met them in their humanness in that moment. And so they need both. So working on your own communication refinement. Okay, young parents in particular, this is a little bit more practical, but young parents, and this totally affects their marriage. Maybe some of you are married and have young children, and you remember how much your marriage felt like it took a back seat in the time of having young children. These are some things that can help marriages by helping young parents. Hands-on help, like actual practical, sending meals, walking them out to the car because they are trying to make sure that their little kids do not run off in the parking lot and get hit by a car. Like, have somebody help walk them out, carry their bags with them, give them hand-me-downs. If you have a school, like, make sure that the uniforms, you can get hand-me-down uniforms. First communion, do you have hand-me-down communion dresses and little suits? Confirmation, same thing. Do you have things to offer families so that they feel like they belong and they don't stand out? Childcare, if you can ever offer childcare at a parish event that is supposed to just be for adults, what a gift for young parents to be able to come, because maybe they don't have family in the area, maybe they haven't found a babysitter that they can trust, maybe they cannot afford to pay for your event and for childcare, whatever. If you can offer childcare an event, that's huge. Family-centered events, opportunities for the whole family to come. Faith formation that focuses on the family, invites the whole family. It reminds them that parents are the primary educators. All of these things, again, what does this have to do with lovemaking? It has everything to do with lovemaking, because when parents feel like they can freely enter into the topic of lovemaking because they're not carrying the mental load of all of these other things, when they feel like they belong at their parish and they're not ostracized because their kids are loud or they're chaotic or they can't even come because they can't figure out how to get there, then they're not going to come and talk to you about lovemaking. They're not going to come and talk to you about sex because you're not available, they're not available, they don't feel safe and comfortable here, they don't necessarily feel like they belong. Oh, I'll bring my kids back to mass when the youngest is 7. Like, we're losing our families because of this, and therefore they're stressed and they're losing this spiritual connection, and then therefore this lovemaking of integrated human act with spirituality is going to lose a lot of its robustness because they're not around. And so these are things to help get them there. Okay, a couple practical ways for how to start a marriage ministry. You could do small groups, maybe a Bible study or a study on a papal document. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, or a book study. I know of a good one, especially about the topic of lovemaking. Maybe you have small groups that are service-based projects. The Knights of Columbus are a tremendous organization that does a lot of service. Maybe you can model something like that, or maybe you can encourage young men, young dads to join your Knights of Columbus. This is another nudge because my husband loves the Knights of Columbus, but there's definitely a stereotype that not very many young men are parts of the Knights of Columbus. Really highlight the opportunities to serve your community. Some things post-Mass gatherings, do something fun after Mass, and it'll encourage families to go to Mass, and then you'll stay afterwards and have a good time. Maybe get sacrament year families together. You all baptized your kids in the last 6 months. Let's get together and have like a little baby group that just gets together and talks about being new parents. Be creative, see what your parish looks like, what do your people like to do, and then offer it at church. One-year weekend retreats, you can have a marriage focused, parent focused theme, silent. This is not new to you, just encouraging you to actually do that. Take the leap and do that. And if you offer the things that were listed before, like childcare or just different ways to allow couples to come together, have it be a spousal retreat, all those things. Quarterly events, so maybe small groups is a lot to manage right now. This is probably a great way to find out what kind of small groups you might be able to do, but having quarterly events and things like that, again, being available. If they are there and they see you there, these conversations will come. And if they see that you are enthusiastic, that you're a safe place, these conversations will come. I can't recommend it enough, but offering childcare just helps so many couples be able to be there. And then like if you have a women's Bible study, even if it's not for married couples, if you have a women's Bible study or a men's Bible study or whatever that might be, to offer childcare will then get those people on the periphery who haven't been able to come because they don't know what to do with their kids. And a way that you can do that is, or some people that will probably be willing to help with it, are empty nesters, get some teens and college kids, retired folks. I'm sure that there are people that would be willing to say, absolutely, I'll watch the kids for a little while. And don't go crazy with what you have to do. Kids will have fun with anything. So I recommend cardboard boxes and cotton balls. Like just let them have at it for an hour with whatever you can find. But if you do have a population of bigger kids, maybe you get a kickball game going or something like that. But don't be afraid of it and go ahead with it. So I really want to hone in on this idea of being available. Do not underestimate the value of being available. So in this conversation about lovemaking, the stage has to be set ahead of time, and your knowledge of yourself, right? Like going back to the stages of discipleship and evangelization, knowing where you are, being really, really honest about where you are, is so critical, because if this is not a conversation that you are comfortable having, that is okay, and that has to really be acknowledged so that either you can better prepare yourself to have those conversations, or you can find someone who is. So that might be that mentorship program. That might be your priest. That might be outsourcing somewhere else to a different parish, a local, like a community parish that you have a good relationship with, right? Because we're not going to be the answer for everything, but we have to acknowledge that. But the only way we're going to know what our people need is by us being available for them. So that is my encouragement for broaching and setting up this topic, because marriage ministry is so needed, because couples really, really need to belong and to have community and to have you rooting for them. You don't have to have all the answers, but you love them. You wouldn't be here if you didn't love them. And so also our book, Lovemaking, How to Talk About Sex with Your Spouse, was meant to also be somewhat of a gift for not only for marriages, but for parishes and religious education offices, for priests, for ministers, because who can expect one person or two people to be equipped to handle all types of conversations? No one expects that. So if this is an area that you are maybe a little bit weary of, maybe a little bit nervous of, we would love for you to consider purchasing Lovemaking as a resource for your couples, but also a resource for yourself to read. It's really not heavy duty. It's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of back and forth. It's stories, but every chapter also ends with conversation starter questions. So they might be helpful prompts for you to start some of these conversations about the topic of lovemaking and marital intimacy. And they're not real zingers. They're really more like, hey, open your heart, share your experience. How do you feel about this? So they come after us, Renzo and myself, sharing how we feel, how we had this conversation, how it didn't go perfectly, how we tried and failed and tried again, right? And all these different things. So our hope is that your authenticity, your willingness, your availability, that will be what makes a fruitful marriage ministry and what prompts fruitful conversations about the topic of lovemaking and marital intimacy. And I thank you so much for joining us, and I'd love to hear your questions.
Thank you so much, Monica. Give you a chance to take a breath here as I invite all of our attendees to submit questions to Monica. What would you like to ask her? Maybe even what is your parish doing in the marriage engagement or marriage enrichment ministry that could be beneficial for others to hear too. I love how you've set this up of finding that community that you can really be yourself, you can be vulnerable with, and how that then leads to deeper questions that couples can ask. And that trust factor being so important, and that availability. What would you say would be the first couple of steps that a parish would need to take to create a marriage enrichment ministry? You know, we've got the marriage prep, right? But not always the marriage enrichment.
Yeah, I would take a good scan at who you have in your parish. Maybe that's going to all the masses for, like for a month, I'm going to go to the 9 a.m. mass one week. I'm going to go to the 11. I'm going to, whatever, going to all the masses and seeing the interaction that happens before and after, seeing the age groups, seeing just really seeing the layout of your population. Maybe that'll help you see that couple right there. That's an outgoing couple. They said hi to 10 different people. It didn't matter who they were. They were interactive. They were lively. Get them on your team. Ask them. It's such a privilege to be asked, oh, you are just so friendly. You are so outgoing. You know and love these people so well. Ask them to be on your team. They might be an active team member. They might be just the people who promote and invite people. They might be the people who know who to go to next and ask for help. But the more that you involve your people from the get-go, the better it will be for your parish to mesh with who's there. Because there's so many programs out there, there's so many boxes that you can buy or curriculums or things like that. But if it's not going to meet the needs of your people, then you wasted a lot of money. And like, not saying that they're not good, but like, see who you have first and then pick a program that matches that. Or maybe you have a very service-based parish, start with that and then lead them to Bible studies, then lead them, like, do some things where they're at first, and then be like, hey, do some of you also want to do like a date night out and we'll have a guest speaker, you know, or what have you. So I would first start by scanning your audience, getting some people who have the inside info, and then planning from there.
That is great advice, great suggestion. And you mentioned some programs. Do you know of what some of these programs are that you could mention, or?
Shoot, I should have looked up the names
That's
beforehand.
okay.
There is one in particular that is a really great marriage prep program. I can tell you the parish and our diocese that used it. And it was kind of like they had the engaged couples, and there was a program for the engaged couples partnered with a married couple, but then it continued after the wedding, so the first year of marriage. So it was actually almost like a 2-year quote unquote commitment for that engaged couple and that mentor couple. And within that, they had plans for some like events that would get the engaged couple, the population of engaged couples and mentor couples together to do things. And they found that very fruitful. I can find out the name of that. Another one, this is not a Catholic program, but I've heard very good things about Domestic Church, which is like a monthly or quarterly get together. One family hosts at their house and the others come and they eat together. Food is so good. Like, if you have it in the budget, serve food, because it like breaks down barriers of, if you're a quiet observer, introverted person, you can eat quietly and like absorb the conversation before you enter and it doesn't feel awkward because you're just eating. So food is really good. So they eat and then they read scripture together. They unpack that a little bit, and then each couple had like a monthly goal, and they talk about like how they met that goal, if they did, but it didn't really do what they thought it would do. And like they just kind of go through that. And it could be a practical one, or it could be a spiritual one, or it could be a combination of both. But I've heard that that's a good program as far as combining that human formation and spiritual formation. So it's definitely something that could be, it's Christian. So like you could use it like Bible, and then it's a Catholic program, basically.
Okay, yeah, great. Well, lots of really good suggestions. And as you mentioned, small groups, right? Small groups are really big and growing in many parishes. We know that Lent is often that time that people are desiring more spiritual nourishment. This could, as you say, your book could definitely be a good book study for small groups, for married couples. Tell everybody a little bit more about what they can expect in this book.
Sure. So one of our primary goals, so one of our primary goals for this book, for this project, was for it to be a conversation starter for couples. So it is not a theology deep dive. While there's definitely theology of the body in it, there is scripture in it, there is catechesis in it. It's not meant to be an educational theology book. And it's also not supposed to be like a how-to practical guide to better sex kind of book either. It's really supposed to be a fruitful conversation starter. And another one of our like sub goals, and it was in sharing authentically about our experience as newlyweds and as we went through marriage. Not the nitty gritty, but the general, like, men and women are different. And do you know what mental load is, and love languages, and play personalities? We learned so many things through our marriage because at about year 4 or 5, we looked at each other and we're like, if we weren't Catholic, we'd probably be divorced right now. And that was both of us came from families of divorce, so that wasn't like a buzzword in our family, but we looked at each other like, this is not going well, and this is not what God wanted for our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And it was affecting all the areas of our life, including our sex life. And so we were just really honest about that and how all of those things contributed to one another. That, like, our lovemaking was not as it was supposed to, and that affected our communication, and our communication affected our lovemaking, and kids entered the picture, and mental health, and just all the things are also integrated. So hopefully, in us sharing our story, no other couple will look just like us, but it hopefully allows for some freedom to, like, be real and be like, okay, this is where we're at, and we want better, and maybe this question will help us get to the root of disagreement that we can't figure out, and just offer like some vocabulary and language for them to use in their conversation to help them sort it out.
Mm-hmm. Well, we thank you so much for sharing, your story in this book and in your desire to help other married couples. It really is so helpful, so practical in so many ways, and it could also be a great gift for married couples. So, as our attendees always know, we like to offer you a little discount here, 10% off when you purchase Lovemaking at AveMariaPress.com. All you need to do is use the code webinar225 to get that 10% discount. Monica, thank you so much for sharing your time with us, your experience, your passion for marriage and lovemaking and family life, and to help all of the ministers to online with us today. So thank you so much. And I invite all of you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I invite all of you to join us next week. Abigail Jorgensen is going to share with us ministries that parishes can create to support families who have experienced child loss. She is a birth doula. She is a professor at St. Louis University. And so she is going to share those things with us next week. So I'll send you an invite in the email that you receive tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Thanks again, Monica. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.